Now, today, let's talk about being an African. Being an African. Every day we wake up in the morning, we say that we are Africans. We struggle because we believe that we are Africans. So the question is, what does it mean to be an African? Is it simply the feeling that we have when we wake up in the morning that we are Africans, or it is something else? And if it is just the feelings, then it is easy to wake up in the morning, the next morning, and decide to be, for example, a Chinese or a Japanese. But we know that that is not feasible, is not possible. So, what is it to be an African? This is what we try to unpack in this brief conversation that we are having today. So, before we start, I will pledge with you to subscribe to our channel, to like the video, and to share it. But as always, we'll begin with the salute, revolutionary greetings, as we always say, peace and love, freedom and decolonization to all African people, those at home, those abroad, and those in the future. If you have two shoes, please sell one and buy a sword. If you have two trousers, please sell one and buy a sword, because now it is time for revolution. And this revolution is no longer on streets. This revolution is in the mind. Because if we are not in charge of our mind, the enemy will use our bodies as tools for self-destruction. So once again, revolutionary greetings. My name is King Kabbalah from the African Continental Unity Party, ACUP. And I'm happy on this rendezvous again, as we do weekly, to discuss important issues, important matters related to our survival as a people in this 21st century, but most importantly, the conditions that can allow us to thrive in this world and to make a powerful voice, a powerful statement in this world as African people. So today we're talking about being an African. What does it mean to be an African? What does it imply to be an African? That's very important to understand. So I look at it in different aspects. I believe that to be an African is first and foremost cultural, is also spiritual, is biological. To be an African is geographical. So all these aspects are very important. So I'm just going to choose maybe three of them to explain what it means to be an African. But above all, I want us to assess what it means to be an African and what we are today, to then ask questions of whether we are really on the right direction, we are on the wrong direction as a people. Well, when we compare what we are supposed to be as Africans and what we are living today. Now, let's begin with the first dimension or first aspect of being an African, which is spiritual or divine. So, in a nutshell, to be African, above and apart all aspects of what it means to be an African, it is also spiritual, or I should say is first and foremost a spiritual and divine, simply because we did not create ourselves. We were brought here on a purpose, on a divine purpose. And this identity, which has been given to you by the divine, is something that you cannot escape, no matter how much you try. So for you to understand it, you have to realize that most of identities that we associate ourselves with, whether it's tribes, nationals, so forth and so on, are identities that we can strip ourselves of them. We can decide one day to take off those identities from us, and it's possible. But the identity of being an African is something that you cannot take away from you. That's the reason why I'm saying that it's divine. It is spiritual, because if you die today, for example, nobody will never know whether you spoke Igbo, Lingala, Swahili, whatsoever. Nobody will ever know whether you were of Sutu tribes, of Luba tribes, of Kikongo tribes, so forth and so on. Nobody will never take that guess. If you die today, nobody will never know whether you had a Congolese passport, a Zimbabwean passport, a Kenyan passport. Nobody will never know all those identities that we pride ourselves in. If you die today, no one will never know whether you were Muslim or you were Christian. You see, these are identities that we have embraced because we have chosen them. We can also choose to discard ourselves of them. And even when we die, nobody will never know what we were unless, they read our biography, so forth and so on. But there's one aspect of our identity as Africans that we cannot get rid of, even when we die, even after millions of years have passed. When they examine the bones of you as African, when they examine our bone structure, they will be able to determine that you were African. And that's the reason why we say that being an African is firstly divine, is spiritual, right? It's something that you cannot run away from. It's divine, it's spiritual. And above that, you have to understand that all other races in this world, whether we talk about Chinese, Indians, whites, have come from you as an African. You are the first being to be brought in this world. All others have come out of you, not you out of them. So there's always that spiritual element that parents have over their children. So that's why I'm saying that being an African is spiritual, is divine, and there's a lot we can talk about this aspect. But what is important to understand is that your identity as an African is above your identity as a Congolese, as Nigerian, as Ghanaian. All these identities, you can change them, you can remove them from your personality, but to be an African, it's something that you cannot get away from because it is divine, fixed from birth, from your creation. The second aspect of being an African is cultural. To be African is cultural, right? And this is very important because culture is the way of life. Culture is what defines us then from social aspect of lives as a human being. So when you look in the culture, the essence of our culture as African people is Ubuntu, which means that it is an aspect of lives that defines our society as a society of people who are interrelated, people who are cooperative, people who are interdependent on each other for success, for anything that they want to achieve in life. They have to depend on their families, on their community, on their society for support, for inputs, for everything that we want to succeed. That's why, briefly, Ubuntu is defined as I am because you are, and you are because I am. So basically, culture is what sustains people's life. Culture is what allows people to pursue their goals, achieve them in their own ways. So when you realize today's life as African people, you will see that when we talk about culture, when the term culture is invoked, what comes to our mind is the attire, the music, the dance, the language, all these things that are important. But the substance of culture itself, which is the interdependence, the cooperation, the mutual support, the reality that defines your success to the point where when you look behind you, you look at what you've achieved, you identify the signature, the fingerprint of your community, your family, in your success, in your upbringing. This is what is missing today. Otherwise, all these things that we celebrate today, like the attires, the clothes, the music, these are the symbols of culture. But the substance of culture itself is that aspect of it that makes my success possible through my reliance on my people. In other words, I have to be able to look today in my life and realize the hand of my community in my making. But that is the aspect which is no longer practical today, because when you look at the African society, you see that we are zombies on each other. We are vampires sucking each other's blood, not to build each other, but to destroy each other. So in other words, I find myself today terrified or threatened by idea of relying on my people, because I may think that they can betray me. So for me to succeed, I have to run to the Western institutions for my success. And that's the reason why all of us, when you get a job offer from Western companies compared to get a job offer from a fellow Africans, you rather choose a Western companies to hire you. And we see this with the domestic workers, for example. If you propose them to be employed by an African family or by the Western family, the choice is clear. So why are we unable today to rely on each other, which is a fundamental to the African culture? Because you cannot tell people to be loyal to Africa, to love Africa and their culture, if they cannot rely on that culture or on their people to put the food on the table, to educate their children and themselves, to have the support which they need in order to succeed with their projects. And this is a very, very downfall of the identity or this aspect of being Africa today, to be this aspect of being an African today. And it makes us lenient towards other cultures, alien cultures, Chinese cultures, Western cultures, for all that we want: cell phones, foods, education, employment, so forth and so on. We rely on other cultures. So our culture is no longer relevant on this aspect. We rather only celebrate it once a year during the African Day, so forth and so on. So this signifies for me the death of a nation, because nations don't die as a result of military invasions. Nations die as a result of their culture being abandoned. When your culture becomes no longer relevant, that is the beginning of your death as a nation. And this is what we are witnessing today, by choice or by default, as a result of colonialism, slavery, so forth and so on. But the important question that we need to ask ourselves is, where are we going as a nation? Are we meant to survive in this 21st century as a people, as a nation, and then thrive beyond the 21st century and grow to regain the power that we have lost? Or we are supposed to die as a nation and to become entities that have been turned upside down, inside out, so that the result of that process creates the beings that we can call little French, little Americans, little British, instead of being Africans within their cultures, because that is what we are living today. The everyday reality of our lives is the reality of living under the skin of other cultures. And we come to our own cultures only when it comes to attires, when it comes to music and dance, which is not significant in terms of sustaining our lives. You see, I used to say that being African today is the most significant battle that you can wage in life, because we are trained through the Western propaganda. We are accustomed to live every day as Europeans. You wake up in the morning, you interact as a European, you eat as a European, you live your life as a European, you speak as a European, so forth and so on. So to be an African, you have to decide early in the morning. You have to put it in your mind that today I'm going to live, to behave as an African. Means I'm going to support my brothers, my sisters, in whatever they are doing so that they can succeed, because that's what Ubuntu means. It means you make a decision to eat as an African, to dress an African every day, because to be an African is no longer a natural phenomenon. It's something that is supernatural, because every day of our lives we are behaving, we are conditioned to live as Europeans, but unfortunately we happen to only live as little Europeans. As I said earlier on, little British, little French, or little American. So I think the direction which we are heading to is not productive in terms of the fight, the struggle that we are supposed to wage in order to achieve what we call the total liberation and emancipation of Africa. We cannot realize that dream without or outside of our culture. So it is time that we make a U-turn and come back to the center of our culture, which is Ubuntu, so that you have to wake up in the morning and decisively live as an African. Instead of criticizing your brother who is doing something positive, support them. Instead of tearing down your fellows who are struggling to put meanings to their lives, support them. Bring some values to what they are doing. And this is what is the essence of being an African. And it is a task for each one of us today. As we begin the new week, we have to decisively make an effort to live as an African, to behave as Africans, to eat as African, to speak as African, with love, with kindness, but also with pride, because being an African is divine. So, for sake of time, I wouldn't take you into other aspect of what is meant to be an African. But I think these two elements of what it means to be an African maybe have revealed to you a dimension of your identity and how we are being taken off the right course, and how we should actually try to come back to who we are in order to pursue our agenda for liberation and emancipation. So, peace and love, freedom and decolonization to all African people, those at home, those abroad, and those in the future. We thank you for your time, and we see you next time. Bye-bye.